So Artur Beterbiev pulled out of the Dmitry Bivol fight a few days ago, citing a torn meniscus, which is a knee injury. As it stands right now, Bivol is still going to be on the June the 1st card. They're just looking for a replacement opponent for him. And they're looking to reschedule the Beterbiev-Bivol fight for September. Now, on a card as stacked as this, to be quite honest, it would be surprising if at least one person didn't pull out, because on most cards, you don't have a bunch of 50-50s. You might have a couple of them, but the majority of fights will be 60-40s, 70-30s, 80-20s, 90-10s, and so on. And so what that means is, for most of those bouts, you're only tuning in to see one guy. You're not tuning in to see his opponent. So if his opponent pulls out, you don't much care. You barely even pay it any notice. But when you've got a bunch of 50-50s on a card, then you're paying attention to both fighters in every fight. And so when you get a pullout, especially when it's the main event, it has a greater impact on you. Fortunately, because this card is so stacked, it's still well worth watching without the main event. And interestingly, the main event was set to be broadcast on ESPN in America, or ESPN Plus, and all the other fights on the card would not be on ESPN Plus, they'd all be on DAZN. So in order to watch the whole card from top to bottom, you would have had to have bought two separate events, as I understand it, which is very strange. But again, that's just in the US. Outside the US, you could watch the whole thing on DAZN. Now, I do have to address this PED speculation because Tunde Ajayi made an observation about Artur Beterbiev, which was that he has pulled out of a lot of fights. A lot of his fights over the past few years have been postponed and pushed back. And the inference he was making, because he didn't flat out say it, but he inferred it. And that was that Artur Beterbiev has been pulling out of these fights because he's cycling off of a PED or several PEDs. In that scenario, presumably he'd have a team of experts who'd constantly be testing him privately to see whether he could pass a VADA test. And when they decide that he can't, because the masking agents aren't working or whatever, they pull him out of the fight. And since Beterbiev has pulled out again on the back of Tunde Ajayi saying that, I have to imagine that a lot more people are going to start believing that that's what's going on. And of course, Artur Beterbiev had some type of unusual finding going into his fight with Callum Smith. It wasn't deemed a failed test, quote unquote. I forget the terminology they used exactly, but I think it was atypical, something like that. And as I said back then, I'm very much open to the possibility that Artur Beterbiev could be juicing. I never dismissed it, but I'm also open to the possibility that he naturally has higher testosterone levels than not only most other 39-year-old fighters, but perhaps even higher than most other 29-year-old fighters. Professional boxers, all of the same age, do not all have the same testosterone levels. If you got a bunch of 29-year-old professional boxers and tested them all for testosterone levels, you'd find big differences naturally. So if one guy has got very high testosterone naturally, by the time he reaches 39, he's going to have higher testosterone than some guys who are 29. That's the reality of it. And as I explained in the video I did about the Beterbiev PED controversy, your testosterone levels fluctuate throughout the year, throughout the week, throughout the day even, depending on what you've been doing. So if you test someone right after a heavyweight session, their testosterone is probably going to be higher than it would be after 2 days of grueling intensive cardio, miles and miles and miles on the treadmill, because in those instances, your testosterone levels can actually crash for a while. What you eat also affects testosterone levels, how you're sleeping, so on and so forth. Your testosterone levels don't drop from age 29 to age 39 in a perfectly diagonal line. It's not like that. They go down, yes, but in peaks and troughs. And as far as these injuries that Beterbiev keeps having, perhaps he's cycling off and it's a cover for that. Or perhaps the frequency with which he's getting injured is exactly what you would expect from any aging fighter. You tend to get injured more the older you get. Now, some people will say, well, high testosterone levels help you recover quickly from injuries, help you heal better, so on and so forth. Well, it depends what kind of injuries they are. I suffered a dislocated shoulder when I was in my 20s, and it never fully healed. Even now, it isn't fully healed. Evidently, it wouldn't have fully healed during this time without surgery. I never got surgery on it. But when I was in my 20s, very high testosterone, I'm a muscular guy, and that injury just wouldn't go away. You know, my shoulder was never the same after that. And when it comes to joint injuries, there are loads of guys like in the NFL, for example, that have jacked up shoulders, jacked up knees, jacked up elbows when they're in their prime, in their 20s. They have chronic injuries. So with Beterbiev and this torn meniscus, that can happen even if you have high testosterone, right? The older you get, more training camps, more wear on the knees and the joints, the hands, so on and so forth. So again, Beterbiev's injury may be suggestive of something dodgy going on, but it's not a smoking gun. What I will say though is this might push me to change my prediction because I was going for a Beterbiev win. If his body's breaking down, I might have to switch to a Bivol win. We'll see. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section below.